So, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. We are going to start our second roundtable for GHTC 2024. The title of our roundtable is How to Get Ready for a Post-Quantum World. So this is like the big question that our community has been addressing for the last decade. And we are going to discuss that now that, as you know, last week, the NIST standards were out, and we need to start this process of transitioning to a post-quantum world. Yeah. So. It doesn't move. Yeah. So our panel, we have a lovely lineup of panelists here. We have Sofia Sedi, Andreas Sosin, Victor Mateo, and Brian Macchia. They will be discussing this topic with us, and we have plenty of questions that or topics that we would like to address today. And some of these questions are going to be answered during our panel. So do we have all the cryptography needed to fully transition to a post-quantum secure infrastructure? Is it necessary to use formal methods to verify the correctness of security proofs and implementations? When can we expect to have large enough quantum computers? This is a current question that we always ask. And when can we expect to complete the transition towards a post-quantum secure infrastructure? So among other questions, we are going to address these ones. We will ask our panelists to be kind enough to discuss that with all of us here. So we would like to start formally the table, and I would like to ask each one of the panelists to introduce themselves. So we may start maybe with Brian. If you have a microphone.
Hi, I'm Brian Lamont here. I guess I'm sitting here wearing on a independent consulting hat, but I'm also the IACR treasurer and part-time executive director of the MPC Alliance. But I ran the post-quantum project at Microsoft for a number of years, starting in late 2014, early 2015, up through 2022.
Hi, my name is Andreas Sosin. I'm a professor at the University of Technology. I led the Sphinx proposal, which became GHTC now, and I'm a researcher for Sandbox AQ. And I'm working for something for a long time, and I do some power verification of these tools.
Yeah. Okay, so hi, my name is Sophia, I'm a photographer at Ray. I'm not representing the IETF of the IETF here, but I also chair several working groups of the IETF and also on the W50. Without me speaking on their behalf, but rather on my perspective, and I have worked on quantum cryptography and currently part of the submission of the Mayo signature scheme.
Hi, my name is Victor Mateo. I have been leading the post-quantum team in TII for quite a long time, since the inception of the team. We have several team members that are involved in proposals. Some of them are now on the finance track for the side of the codes that went for Ken. And then we have plenty of collaborations and proposals in the call for signatures. And I'm personally in the one from Perth, but we are involved in many of them. And besides that, we also participate in the migration for the UAE and trying to give capability to the country to migrate to post-quantum.
Thank you all for being here. It's awesome to have you. And please, to the audience, feel free to ask questions anytime that you want to do it. We will try to do this as fluid as possible so that we can get as much information from our speakers as possible. We would like to start first with some personal, particular questions to each one of them. I would like to start with Brian. Brian, you are here for a second time in GHTC. We are very happy to have you. And 2 years ago, you said that if I remember correctly, that the industry will only start transitioning towards a post-quantum world when the DC standards were out. Now that finally happened 2 years after, what will be your thoughts? What do you feel about it?
So. Fair, much better. So yes, 2 years ago, we were still waiting for, NIST had just made selections, if I remember the timing right, but we were in this, what I call it as the psych summer. This psych had just been announced as a fourth round candidate and had been broken. We'll get to that in a little bit. We needed to see the ink on the FIPS before I thought a lot of industry would move. Early work would have happened on forward-looking companies and protocols, and we expected TLS to happen first, which is sort of ongoing work there. We've seen experiments, things like that. But the ink's only dry now, and actually, to be fair, I'm speaking only personally, I think it took this a little bit longer than they had planned, and we all had hoped for the first set of documents to come out. But now that they're out, that actually triggers a whole bunch in the US. Well, I haven't been to the US perspective on this. It triggers a whole bunch of actual reporting and operating requirements on the US government, because in the last 2 years, since NIST made those selections, we have seen both legislative and executive orders in the United States related to PQC. The White House put out a series of memos, most notably one called National Security Memo 10, which was basically authored by Andrew Berger, who was on the defense side of the NSA and is now the cybersecurity advisor for the National Security Council. And that actually requires a certain amount of work by agencies to do things. The most important one is they had to start with tallying up and doing inventories on the systems that were going to need to be upgraded. And in fact, the more notable result that we got, beyond the fact that the FIPS got inked and are formally done this past week, was a report that y'all may not have seen from the Office of Management and Budget that went to Congress about 2 weeks ago, late July, with the first top line number for their estimate of what it's going to cost to do the PQC migration for the civilian side of the US government. That number is $7.1 billion, which is not a small number, okay? And that, I think, tells you if it's just, and that doesn't include any of the national security systems that are in DoD and the intelligence community, and it doesn't include any of private industry. But if you extrapolate from that, there's a really big market. And that's sort of the first defined number of that. And that's going to cause a lot more companies, I believe, to start paying attention. Now, the flip side of that, and I'll put it out here as well, and this was a lot of the conversations that have been in sort of the conferences over the past few months, is that we're also fighting in this space with, frankly, AI, which is sucking all of the air out of everything else. And so if you're on the industry side, on the one hand, you've got big market opportunities to sell. And I think some of the other folks on this panel are maybe more directly involved in that, maybe can speak to it, to sell tools, to help people do upgrades. That entire government market's going to be available, and that's going to apply around the world by extension. But you're also fighting with shareholders wanting to know how much you're doing on AI right now, and you're fighting for resources. So I do believe that because the standards are now done, there is mandatory yearly reporting of progress that's going to happen in the US government, and that's going to cause the government agencies to ask their providers for things, and you'll see more requests to industry. But the industry's also got this tension where PQC is not a hot new thing. The AI stuff is, and that's going to be a tension that we're going to have to continue to fight for as photographers to make sure that these efforts are continue to be fully funded.
Brian, I have just one comment on what you were saying. What are your feelings? Do you feel like optimistic or?
No. Okay. Am I optimistic? No, I can't say I am. But, and let me be blunt why, I'm not seeing enough in public yet that tells me that the big providers are doing enough and, or at least announcing enough about their PQC plans. Okay. I can trash my former employer on this all I want, because I don't work for them anymore, right? Because I'm not seeing the work. I see the work in the ITF. Okay, Sophia, is, I hope you will talk to that. And you go look at the number of documents they're tracking across the IETF, and it's exactly what I expected to happen, was that you're gonna have work in a whole bunch of different working groups within that organization and other standards organizations. But I expected to see more statements from major software and hardware manufacturers about their PQC transition plans and when they're going to roll things out, and we have seen it this state. TLS is the easy one, yes, but there's a long tail of standards, and as you get to smaller industries that have more proprietary or small use protocols, there's more work that's got to get done. Then you contrast that with NSA's stated objectives, right? They want PQC to be the primary hardware signing algorithm by next year. I don't believe that's gonna happen, okay? I also look back and I'll remind everybody, and I may say this again this week as I live in nostalgia. 20 years ago today, at the rump session in crypto was Shana Wong's break of MD5. And we know how long it took us to get the industry to transition from ND5 to SHA-1, and that was a lot easier than the transition we're talking about right now. And so I think we have to keep that in mind. But no, I had expected to see more public statements from the major providers about when they were rolling things out. And maybe that's just coming, but even if you look at who responded and said stuff publicly to the NIST docs getting done, I didn't see the uptake I would have liked to see.
Okay, thank you very much. Given the relevance of this topic, maybe some of the panelists want to follow up. I see Sophie that she's kind of eager. Yeah.
So it is working. Yeah, it's working. But yes, I agree a lot with Brian. Like at the IETF, we actually have a lot of documents. We even created a working group dedicated to the post-quantum transition, but it's not going to impose anything to the different working groups that exist in the IETF, but kind of coordinate some of the ideas. And that has been happening quite a lot on the standardization perspective. And I saw a lot of effort actually from the industry to transition, I would say, some years ago. But then as Brian was saying, AI came to be and also the fears of the recession. And that in turn has meant that a lot of the resources that companies are currently putting their effort on is not so much in post-quantum, but rather where the funds are coming, which is mostly AI. And some of the other jobs that are mostly related to network protocols, where post-quantum needs to happen, kind of like left behind. Which is really sad, because then what we're doing is that we are kind of leaving behind a threat model that is currently out there, that of course all of our communications could be broken if they were to solve for some other thing that may work well for society or may not work well for society. So all of the current efforts that I'm currently seeing that companies are showing the plans is mostly for TLS 1.3, and also only for the confidentiality part of TLS 1.3, not even for the signatures. That is, yes, it's easier to transition, but it doesn't mean that we have to leave like everything behind. Also, another justification that I've seen is that the majority of the other protocols that use cryptography are the application layer. So if you think about credentials, or if you think about uses of zero knowledge proofs, or if you think about different flavors of signatures, yes, those happen at the application layer. So the justification of some of the industry is that, of course, those are going to be relying on some secure communication, which is TLS. So it's enough to transition TLS. But that's again a threat model in which the only thing that you care about is the communication between a client and a server, but not again like the actual security of the end users. So we're still a long way to go. The only thing that I've seen that has a concrete path is the confidentiality part of TLS 1.3. Also, I'm really happy at least that we're currently focusing on TLS 1.3, because if you were ever part of the IETF, you will know that it took us decades to standardize TLS 1.3. On the previous panel, someone said that it was really easy to just move from HTTP to HTTPS. That is not true. It was really difficult. It took us decades and decades. The RFC was published in 2008. until this day, they are really providing that announced SSL, which is like, you know, the first version of the protocol, completely broken. So it really takes a long time. So I'm really worried that a lot of companies and organizations out there are not really having a clear path because of the current economic downturn and also because of the rise of other kinds of technology, when really that should be focused on the decision.
So just to complete that, I cannot refrain myself. It's going to be a long question, but what are your feelings? Are you optimistic or not so much?
I would like to be optimistic, but I'm not so optimistic anymore because, again, like all of the plans that I've seen from companies or organizations have been only focusing on the confidentiality part of TLS 1.3. At least right now, they're only focusing on TLS 1.3, and the working group from the ITF, the standardized TLS, have said now clearly that they no longer are going to allow to be supported TLS 1.2, which I'm really happy that that's very happening. But I'm not optimistic. My optimism is that a lot of companies are going to migrate from the confidentiality part, and all of the rest, which is the signatures and also all of the kind of more different types of cryptography, are going to be left behind.
Thank you very much. Andreas, I'm sure you have some thoughts. Appreciate.
So I think I want to build on what Brian said. Like, you have this problem that cryptography or IT security in general is not really something, except if you're selling IT security, that is actually making a business case for you. Right? You're not earning money by this. And this transition makes it even worse because your stuff gets more expensive because things are slower, things are bigger. So you have to sell this upwards, and this means you have to produce an urgency that this actually happens. And so I think the uptake is, for that reason, somewhat slow and needs push from governments or legislative bodies that can control and make sure that actually the users are protected, because otherwise this will not be taken up. So we had a discussion with the Dutch government in this regard. Let's see if this happens, but they were a bit surprised that they should actually do something. And I think for companies that are not doing IT security, so speaking really as an independent person, I think the problem is that many of them really first have to do the inventory. Like they are not aware where they actually are using cryptography. And by coincidence, one of my employees is building a system to do this, but there are many, I think, currently looking into this. On the other hand, where I'm somewhat positively surprised is how many people that do sell cryptographic solutions are actually moving somewhat faster. And I think the working groups are a good example of this.
I want to just add on to Chris's point. You know, one of the things that we got to watch for on the research side is that research funding in PQC doesn't get decreased, or that the light doesn't get sucked out of that as part of funding the actual transition work. So, you know, the Office of Management and Budget in the United States say Congress is going to have to appropriate at least $7.1 billion to civilian agencies for the transition. Now, that doesn't mean Congress is actually going to go do that, right? We don't know how much money they're going to fund, but the argument has to be made that not only do you need to have that funding for an enterprise to migrate, like the government in the United States, but they got to continue to fund the research in PQC that we all do, because we have to keep looking and trying to break these things, right? And I use Cycle as an example of that, right? You have to fund continued research, because that's how we're going to gain confidence in these algorithms, right? And what I fear, and what I hope does not happen, is that Congress says, well, we don't have to fund the work of the National Science Foundation anymore because the fix are out and they're done, and we'll just take that money and put it into part of the transition. And those buckets don't intermix, right? We need to make sure there's continued research funding around the world for the work that we all in this room pretty much do, as well as the transition work to help upgrade systems.
Thank you, Brian. And I have a question for Andreas. I know, correct me if I'm wrong, that you have one foot in the industry and one in the academia. How do you see these two worlds with respect to this topic of transition? What are the perspectives? They speak different languages, or?
Well, I'm a researcher also in the industry side, right? So I'm not in product or anything, so that means I don't see that much about that. That's really hard to say.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to add to Roundtable is, so yes, we now have camps, we have signatures. I mean, this is what Sophia said. I mean, currently we're fighting about camp combines, right? I mean, something that where you would say, like, yeah, there was this paper from 2018 by, I don't know all three names, that's name none, but there's a paper called camp combine, and you would say this thing is solved, but it's obviously not. Right? Because otherwise you couldn't fight so nicely about this. And so this happens for every little thing. When you actually put it into practice, you see there are new research questions coming up of how to do this actually right, and this needs funding.
Thank you. Victor, should you have some comments to make?
To be honest, I understand the points. I think I have been believing everything that we're saying, but whenever I have to find myself trying to pitch a company to the migration, and I understand that maybe everything changes now because okay, now we have the standard and everything, but then you go to entities and you see what is recommended, and the recommendation usually is either to use things with the complexity and conflict task, or to use some sort of hybrid things. But hybrid things, what is the concept of this hybrid classic post-quantum is that if the post-quantum break, you have the classic, then how do I convince the company to use something that is done in a way that the only safeguard is that the argument is true, it doesn't work. So it's certainly, it's understandable from our perspective to propose to have hybrids because it kind of decreases the risk. But from the point of view of someone who needs to integrate the solution and say, okay, I need to migrate post-quantum, it kind of showcases that maybe the technology is not ready. If the solution is some sort of a hybrid, just in case it breaks. And it's, again, from the perspective of someone who has been doing the research on that, it's very understandable. But if I am a company, I need to migrate, do I find this like a point where, oh, this technology is mature, I should move when they are saying, you know what, just in case, keep doing what you are doing until now, just in case it breaks. I think that's another point against what we're trying to do. And it's a point on what you were saying, in terms of keep investing, keep putting the money where it makes purpose. So don't stop just because you have to migrate. But at the same time, it is kind of a counterintuitive for them to say, okay, should I migrate now then? Because I understand, and I totally support the comment from Sophia about, okay, people is going to try to protect the information against this store knowledge later attacks. However, if I have to take the risk, will I do the same with the signature when I know, okay, I know 10 years, 15, disregarding the amount of people that will say that quantum computers are basically like a Santa Claus. They will never come, and it's someone trying to push it in your head. Which let's understand that this is also another side of how it pushes the mentality. But would you convince someone to take the effort to change all their PKI infrastructure just for something that is not at least until who knows when? And I think that's the thing. I think I understand also why they push so hard into protecting against that, but I don't know. I think it's not so easy for a company to accept the risk and to put the investment that we are talking about and the disruption of the business that it can cause just for it to be hybrid or a technology that is okay, it was the standard 1 week ago. Let's go and take it. You know, so I think the process is long. That doesn't mean that it shouldn't start, but people should have the perspective that it's not going to happen. Certainly, I don't know who believes that in 1 year quantum is going to be the standard, but I think there needs to be more of a scope on the long term rather than short term focusing on protecting the data or the companies in general.
Well, we have a debate right there about this trade-off, this compromise. The audience, anyone wants to ask a question here or comment right now? Yes, please. Go ahead.
Okay, so I think like I really like that, that's a really good point. The like, we certainly, okay, so it's very important to think about the threat model and the time scale in which it's gonna happen. Store now and decrypt later is like the threat right now, so that's why it's good to work on transitioning to chems. Digital signatures are obviously harder. Like from an industry perspective, like I think we do need to know how much time we have. But I wanted to actually ask a specific question about something Brian was saying earlier. How much, like for digital signatures in particular, how much is this a question, like, how much do we expect things to change? So on the one hand, cryptanalysis means key sizes might get bigger. On the other hand, advances in new schemes, say Mayo, might supplant the things that that NIST has recommended right now. But we can't deploy existing digital signatures in certain cases. So we're wondering, like, we can re-engineer protocols so that we use digital signatures more efficiently. That's one thing we can work on right now. But if that effort is like wasted because things change, then that's what I'm like, I guess that's what we need to decide between. Like, do we work on the protocol engineering problem now, or like do we need to hold off and let things settle first? Sorry, that was rambling.
Right. So flexibility of limit. So I don't think has ever been a cryptographic algorithm which we can say with 100% of security, this will never be broken. Because even if you have one, maybe tomorrow someone will find the actual mathematical algorithm and break it. And we don't have any kind of safety plan. We will all run in circles trying to put out the fire. I don't even want to think about it because we will have to migrate everything. So it's more about like actually the trust that we have in the algorithm. And yeah, some form of verification efforts, some verification of implementation until we actually feel more secure, but we will never have 100% proof that they will never be broken because mathematically something might have found. So the question of this pattern. So I'm more on the camp that I really love like all of the research that is currently happening on signatures and making them smaller. But I also feel like this is an opportunity to actually redo some of the protocols that currently also doesn't work or are practically serving in basic. Like think about the NSX. If you ever try to actually deploy the NSX, it's really painful and it's really hard to maintain, and it doesn't even give you all the security properties that sometimes for censorship systems you actually want. So currently, none of the candidates or actually standardized algorithms that are currently part of the NIST process actually fit that well on the NSX. And that means that maybe what we need is actually to replace the NSA and put a protocol that is actually much easier to deploy and actually provides you with some of the properties that users and civil society have been wanting for a really long time. So I would say refactor the protocol.
Okay. Excellent.
I also want to answer those. I think we have to, like security is always a question of risk assessment, right? We never get perfect security. So what you actually do is you estimate the chance that something really bad happens, and then you check how much you're willing to pay to actually prevent this. And this is always a trade-off, and this is something you have to deal with the customer. Like you have to explain to them. Right? This is the same as for quality assurance. Like their processes for this, that part somehow in the security world, I think is very badly treated. Like in other areas, there's a whole science of how to deal with this. In the security world, is again, you have to sell this to your boss, but but I agree with your point that this is of course challenging.
So just to add on top of what both of you are saying, I totally agree. Don't get me wrong. I totally agree that it needs to be done. But coming to the example of Dieter Kerman, I never saw Dieter Kerman done with two different cryptographic primitive. I never saw someone saying, okay, do this become a elliptic curve and do this become with a modular method. I never saw this because even if one breaks, the test is not because if one breaks one, not like the other. But disregarding this, I don't see us proposing, okay, use two different kind of cryptographic primitives at the same time to solve or something because somehow there is the understanding that it's faster. And I'm not saying that it's a very smart or a very bad decision to do hybrid. I'm just saying that from the perspective of the one who needs to assess the risk, this is an extra risk for them. It's maybe not a real risk. It's just a feeling from the one who does it. That's the main problem, I think.
Yeah, I do agree.
Yes.
Maybe we finish, or actually, I briefly wanted to answer also to Chris, because I think for signatures, there are some cases where you cannot just change the signature last minute, right? So if you think about satellites, if you think about the Netherlands, we get the dikes, like the floodgates. I don't want anyone else to get control over this remotely. So there is high security infrastructure where you maybe want to react now, and there are cases where it's also somewhat easy, like firmware updates for resource constrained devices that are maybe out in the future for long. And in other places, it is indeed maybe enough to start building crypto agility, so that you actually can swap out the signature scheme at the major points. But then you have to be prepared to actually do this. I think one problem with the MD5 SHA-1 transition was there's so much stuff hard-coded like this, which not happen, right? Your digest goes from 128 to 160, you're done.
Yeah, the number of products that said we didn't have space for 160 bits of SHA-1. Could we truncate the SHA-1 hash to 128 to fit it into our database that we had to analyze and say, yeah, in that case, it's okay. It's absolutely true. All right, to both of your points. So let me take the hybrid one first. There's a debate, if you look at the formal government positions between roughly the Five Eyes group, right? US, UK, right? Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the other continental Europe states. The French in particular came out right very strongly and said we want hybrid, whereas the Five Eyes said you should just switch over to the new algorithm, right? What's the point in doing so? And we as cryptographers in my position, my personal one, well, we're still gaining acceptance in all the new things, and so that's why you want to hybridize, or possibly even hybridize two post-quantum schemes, right? Because I don't care about space or time or execution costs or anything that we normally do as engineers, you know, I just don't get scared. So that debate is a healthy debate to have. And I understand why we're having debates over combiners and how we're going to do it with signatures and things like that. But there are government positions out there that say you should just flip. They also think you can flip a lot easier than we do. To your question about sort of where to put the effort effectively at time. Part of the problem is, and Andreas already referred to this with satellites, right, is there are hardware systems out there or critical infrastructure systems, national security systems, where you get one shot every 15 years to upgrade the hardware. And you got to do something now because you've got a timeline coming in the US from, say, NSA for those national security systems that says you got to put something in there, which means you're either putting in dilithium or you're putting in Sphinx Plus into those systems. And they really are focused early on. The first target on the NSA graphics, current timeline, is firmware assignment. They're most worried about that. That's sort of what they say publicly. And so you got to kind of fit what you can. And I will tell you, I had hardware guys coming to me 3-4 years ago saying, we have to plan now for the stuff that we're going to start deploying in 27, 28 that's going to have a 10-year lifetime. And we got to lock it down now. So this is what we're going to go with, right? And I think all of that kind of pushes. The final point, we got to both MD5 and even the ECC. Why are you seeing, so personal opinion right now, why did we see so much effort this time around in terms of statements from the US government to US industry and US government agencies about doing stuff? It's because they learned the lesson, I think, that with ECC, they simply said, the NSA got up and said, sweet pea, all gonna move. Nobody moved, right? We were dragging, everybody dragging the feet on it. We're still trying to get parity in the public key infrastructure between ECC and RSA, right? And I think the movement you're seeing, at least from the government entities, and I think this is shared among the Western allies, is to try to goose industry and the civilian agencies to move faster than they did with ECC. And actually try to keep things going. And I think that's something to keep in mind too. And I think it's a positive thing, but I think they need a little bit more stick, and maybe they gotta put some more carrots out there too for people to move. Carrots being funded.
Okay, thank you. There is any question here? Yes.
So still talking about hybrid, but leaving aside whether or not it's a good idea, lots of people do want to do it. And without standards coming out around that yet, that's been a big issue. I've been with various groups where it's like, well, we want to deploy this, we know the quantum algorithms we want. We know the classical algorithms we want, and we know that we want to do hybrid. Both people, we have no standards. We don't know what a hybrid key looks like. It's telling all of our teams, do you need to use 2 keys? Is a complete non-starter. There needs to be a hybrid key. There needs to be a hybrid signature and a rule for, do you require and, do you require or, and all of that. So without that kind of stuff, and I appreciate your thoughts on this problem space too.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I have the receipts on this, but I gotta go look. I'm pretty sure that when I filed comments on NIST's proposal for how to run the PQC competition in 2016, I told them they better include hybrid modes. And the answer was that's explicitly outside the scope of the FIPS competition. Okay, so they were set on that. Completely agree with you, we need those standards. Glad to see the works happen at the ITA. But I believe there was a US government choice not to do that back when they opened the whole process up. And I think, just thinking back, I think it comes back to, we wanted to be able to make arguments about some of our candidates and how well they hybridized with ECDSA at the time, or ECDH. I think so.
Yeah, so at least, I don't know, something's still working, okay? So at least from the idea perspective, but we were also waiting for was what the NIST standards, because we needed like a standardized algorithm in order to move everything. But we did do the good work of actually having ready some of the drafts that we're actually just waiting for the finalized standards from NIST to like push them ready to go. But I agree with Brian that that process could have been run from the NIST perspective much more nicely. And also much more on time, because we really took a really long time to actually have. I think in the TLS working group, we have one draft of the hybrid. Dr. Axel is one of the authors of, and that draft has been in working group last fall since like forever. And we were just waiting for the need to actually standardize the algorithms to be able to ready to go. On cryptographic agility. So we do have already sometimes 2 sets of algorithms that can be used. That is TLS 1.3. You have, for example, AES-VCM as a block cipher, and you have Chachapoly as a string cipher, just in case there's an attack from one or the other. And the same for having elliptic curves or RSA. So we do have this kind of like, just in case, fall back to the other and submit that specific set of cipher suites. So we have that, and that's why at least at the IETF, when we have talked about hybrids, it hasn't been a shock. It has been like, okay, we also thought about this when we did TLS 1.3. There's a debate about cryptographic agility, about choosing one cipher suite or having a set of them. In the middle of that discussion, like days of actually using them. No, you advertise all of the algorithms and the server chips. Yes, I think that's it.
I think there's one thing to add to the hybrids. So this is the first time that we're in a situation where the schemes that we're replacing are not at the moment necessarily broken. I mean, there is so now the AAA situation, but also that is the risk assessment thing, right? So in previous situations, there was just no reason to keep the old stuff around because it was broken anyway. So why would you hybridize with a broken scheme, right? But now you have stuff which can potentially still give you security. We have good experience also with implementations. which maybe comes into the question of the formal applications there. And there's the last thing that you actually can speed up some things potentially like certification. Right? So you get this for free.
Okay, thank you very much. So as you can see, there are many things to consider in this transitioning. And then it's a good time to make an announcement that we tried our best to complete this table at 12. We are in the middle of the table because Alex Bishop is inviting us, all of us, to go to the CPL's Escape from Success. These are puzzle challenges, part 1, and she will be waiting for us at 12. So you are most welcome to join this challenge right after this table. I would like now, going back to our table, to focus the discussion on some questions that I have prepared for our panelists. For instance, imagine let's put us in the scenario where we accept that we need to definitely transition now to the post-quantum secure infrastructure. Are we ready in terms of, do we have all the cryptography ready to move to the post-quantum setting? Because we are talking mostly about keys and signatures, but what about zero-knowledge protocols? For instance, in the previous table, they were mentioning about pairings as a key building block to create snarks. How are we going to do it? What is going to happen with the blockchain's world, for instance, in a post-quantum scenario? I don't know if any one of you want to comment about it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot still open, right? So there are knowledge proofs, there are left space proposals, but they are far from efficient. They are getting significantly better due to the efforts of a bunch of people in the community, but that's still a small group working on them. If you look at something like OPRFs, which are used in several places, if you look at protocols like Fake, which is used in many places, right? Like every one of you that traveled from abroad here has a passport which uses the Fake internally. So we need stuff to replace this. And if you think about how long the processes are to synthesize new protocols for passports, which have to be agreed upon with all nation states, that's fun stuff. Like that will not happen from within a day or two, and also not within a year. And so we need proposals for these things.
Right.
And it comes back to we need actually research.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, so I will agree quite a lot with Andreas. And also this, and we see like this technology that we have been fighting for decades also, because the majority of times you're not through, so you have line signatures, or you have OPRF, so you have OPEC that kind of wants to really play fast with. The majority of times, this is the fight that we have had as civil society or organizations of actually having more privacy preserving properties for the user. It has taken a really long time, the majority of times. If you see, for example, the idea, there are protocols, for example, you use HTTP, or encrypted client below, or you have OPEC, and you have privacy pass. All of those protocols have been standardized or are currently being standardized only in the last years. And it was really a big fight to actually agree with everybody, but we also need all of these privacy preserving properties, but we also need to have the metadata in certain protocols, so we need to replace last passwords because it seems that they really degrade usability, that we need to move away from third-party cookies because it seems that they are really tracking vectors. And for all of these, we're using kind of these more different types of cryptography, and it's currently being taught quite a lot at the WHTC level and also at the IETF level. But in the majority of those conversations, there's never actually the point of actually also thinking of them to be post-quantum as well, because we're still also still in the fight of actually trying to push forward all of these privacy preserving properties. So kind of like post-quantum gets pushed to the side because we're still fighting for privacy. But I would say that at least in those conversations, it would be great to have at least one point and say like, okay, has this possibility to be post-quantum ready or not? And at least in the majority of these cryptographic algorithms that I'm talking about, it's not that they are only used by the blockchain or like Web3 technologies, but I couldn't use to actually push for privacy in the web. So it would be great to actually at least have the point in the conversation table if they are positive for quantum or not. So yeah, it would be great to work on that.
We are pursuing classical privacy, let alone those quantum is it's another piece. Yeah, some other comments here. Or let us say hello. One person.
I think it's actually a good point for, given that we are doing it now, given that it's so early, why not doing it already for one? Why do we make the effort of making something just because we have a technology now? We know that we're not to migrate the data. I think it would be good to, as she was mentioning, to have at least someone who tries to understand the idea behind it and understand which are the primitives that can be used and try to play with this. So things got faster because I think there was a lot of push towards the digital signatures just for the needs, and a lot of push to do CAM. But what happened with the rest of technologies and primitives that we are currently using everywhere almost, like I understand that CAM is the basic one and it needs to be done fast. But plenty of other primitives that are used on a daily basis, and we will not have them. What would be the case? It's just like they got forgotten. I think we cannot migrate everything. I don't think we have the ability, and I think it's partially our mistake because we follow the canon too much. So
Yeah, we don't have the fancy cryptography. We don't have post-quantum fancy cryptography yet, as people like to say. Fancy being our more exotic things that we build on top of the base. We don't have that yet. We need to continue to do the research on that. When I would advise customers on how to prepare for the transition, and I was telling them this for years, I said, when you put a request for proposals out, you better put as part of that RFP to your vendors, how are they going to do the PQ transition for what they're proposing to sell you? And if they don't have an answer for that, well, why would you buy that equipment now knowing that the transition is coming? Well, the same goes for all of us and the standards organizations when new protocol standards are presented, is that if it doesn't have a post-quantum, if it's not PQ ready, if it doesn't come with that, well, why would you start the standardization process on it, right? Why are you going to do work on a classical only protocol, which you're then going to have to update later? And so I think part of the ecosystem is, post-quantumness, whatever the word would be, needs to be a baseline property of what we're doing now, whether it's ZKPs or it's anything else, or just a new protocol coming to another part of the IKEA.
I think there's one thing where we have to be careful because many of these things are really improving privacy significantly. And there's a good chance that we will need another moment to actually fix this on a post-quantum level. So I think if you see fundamentally there's a barrier, we do it this way to actually make it post-quantum. I think this is a good argument to maybe not do it this way, but in general, I would not hold back standardization just because it's not possible.
Okay, you have a very good point there, where you don't want to degrade the progress we're making toward privacy preserving technologies because of the PQC thing, and as long as it's acknowledged, I think that's fine. But I wouldn't take something and standardize it without at least there being an acknowledgement that this is not PQC today, but we understand the benefit of getting this out the door early, and that there's going to have to be another transition. I mean, this is not unlike the French government saying we want hybrid for 10 years, and then we know there's going to be another transition where we're going to take the hybrid away, right? Because we don't think we'll need it anymore. But that's a very good thing.
Yeah, so I really love with Andrea that I don't think it should be a deal breaker, but it should be at least there, of like the conversations need to happen. Because for example, at the GHTC, where we standardize a lot of the more principle setting and stuff, because they see at the application layer. And I have maybe 3 conversations in all of these years about post-quantum, and that is too little, I think, for an standardization process. At least somewhere I should say, But this is also kind of a call to the community that see all of the other proposals that are currently happening in the privacy preserving in the state, and maybe not only focus on the network protocols, but also on all of these kind of like new fancy exotic cryptography and how to actually move into this one. I think it's both very nice ethically and also as an exotic proposal to look at.
Right, and I think that one big dilemma about this is that, you know, I am sure that all of us here, or most of us are cryptographers, if not all of us. And we are always thinking about ideas, and probably you have very brilliant ideas of new schemes that you would like to propose. And this is not stopping. For instance, right now we have these additional signature contests. And here in the table we have several proposals. There is the Mayo lady, there is the Pearl doctor, there are people working in certain base. So what's going to happen? I mean, if it's already difficult to transition, say, to dilithium, are we going to consider seriously beautiful signature schemes such as Mayo, for instance, as long as it's a dream? Well, I mean, Victor was saying, convince me that the risk is worth to take the risk for transitioning to this. But now transitioning twice, not just once, but twice, maybe? Or what's your take about it? And also with the audience, anyone in the audience wants to have an opinion on this? I don't know, maybe the majority?
Yeah, so migrations are never easy, and I don't think we have the most successful migration that we ever had is the migration from TLS older versions, or SSL, if you want to call it, to TLS 1.3. But it turns out that not everybody migrated, and I know it's tricky for everybody, but a lot of more on the server side, different protocols and systems that still at the some of the older versions. So we have never really fully transitioned to TLS 1.3. These last year, I think, finally there was a proposal to completely disengage TLS 1.2 on the IETF TLS working group, and that is great, but it means that we will advertise that RC or that is a specific node. But if someone wants to still advertise it in the industry or in the organization level, they still can. So there's not like a completely 100% migration that I think has ever happened in the industry. I was part of actually a really nice workshop that happened in Singapore on Etsy, and there a researcher actually presented that they did their research over all of the GitHub projects that are used by organizations. And they checked which kind of status and what kind of algorithms they were advertising. And there on top of everything was MD5, was RC4, it was some of the really old versions of TLS. So that still exists out there, and we haven't found a good proposal. What I would always encourage is if you work on a company or an industry to actually create a solid migration plan on how you're actually going to do this. Because it will not come from the standardization process. We can say as a standardization, here we have the RC, here we have the drafts, here we have the documents, but it is the will of companies and organizations to actually transition, and that means actually have a good transition and migration. And maybe we'll have to migrate once, that is true. Because the research does follow up, and it could be also that maybe someone finds back to lattices, or they find it back to multivariate cryptography that completely breaks it. And in that case, yes, we will need to transition again.
Thank you. Victor? Yeah.
Yeah, so my take when I was talking about that, it was more about the effort put on trying to come up with new signatures and how far are they from the original one. So if you are now putting all the effort and putting a standard around the lithium, and then you go out and you try to propose a new standard, okay, now it takes 4 years. Let's see if it's 4 years, because again, cryptographic problems are less treated than others. The constructions are different now. A lot of people are using also emphasis ahead, also variants from let's say other proposals in general. And the problem here for me is that if it takes 5 years and everyone is already taking the lithium, okay, I agree that then it's the case of what you were saying before. You can always put tools, schemes, and have them there. But the big point will be to have an alternative. But this is a big point for people to proceed on it or to gain so much advantage. it's a lot of effort, 5 years for just having something that most of the time will lay down there.
I think we really have to understand these things as a chance. We have the chance to actually get our house in order. We have the chance to actually make sure we maybe start thinking about cryptographic inventories a bit differently, that we maybe think about, we should be able to switch stuff. We shouldn't hard code everything, you know, I mean, one might think we would have learned this with MD5. We didn't, but it's another chance. And maybe this time.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
So with regards to the second call for signatures and the additional ones, right? If you have, at least my predicted timeline for that says we're probably not going to get FIPS for those for another 5 years. Because we don't know when NIST is going to make their publication of who makes it out of the first round. They're clearly not going to only have one round. It's going to be at least 2 rounds. And when you look at, 2 years from when they pick something to when the FIPS comes out, which is what it was for these, we still need to get Falcon. And then we're going to have the additional signatures, right? So there's only so many NIST people, and they're all overworked, and I give them a lot of credit for what they're doing. They have a lot on their plate. We're looking at 5 years best for when we get additional signatures out. I don't think you're going to, for a number of the constrained cases that we talked about, I don't think you're going to see a double migration there. I think they're going to wait. I think if you are talking about a system where it's a very small device, you really care about the size, right? And this was very specific about why they wanted the additional signature schemes, and it had to be cases where it really came in significantly smaller than 6+, where you had some other benefit over dilating the problem. That it's going to be the cases where you are so size constrained or power constrained or whatever it is that you're going to skip what's currently out there in their way. And that's something that is again a risk that those environments are going to, and those products are going to take. But I think that's what you're going to see. I think it, because if they can use it now, any of the 3, they do it. And I think you'll see for some of these satellite systems and some of these very tiny, microcontrollers and things like that, they're going to just wait. And then we'll see what happens with whatever comes out, whether it's Mayo or one of the others. And then we're going to be kicking a whole other process again. So it is a full employment act for everybody in the IETF and in our entry, because every time this comes out with a new document, it's going to trigger off a whole bunch of protocol standards to be updated to add those algorithms in. And so we're going to be back here probably for the next decade, plus talk about how the migrations are going. For 10 years, we can go back to a retrospective, right? And see how we can.
Yeah, yes, we can always see watch these videos. Yeah, I have another question for people that are working in research. Let's imagine that one of you guys is working in formal verification. Does it has a space in this rush transitioning to post-quantum? I don't know if anyone of the panelists wants to ask the question. Obviously, Andreas would be.
I think this is really important. I mean, we have seen these schemes are somewhat new. We found in all 3 finalists that are now published, we found mistakes at some point in the proof. So, I mean, we were kind of aware that the transform is not really covered by a proof. Since we found a mistake in the proof, it was in the listing, we found a minor bug which was around for 10 years, and like going back to one of the first papers by Barney on the topic. And I mean, this was really a paper that I don't know how many people read it. I don't know how many people actually use the proof and build up on it, like not just use it in a black box, but modified it. And so where you would think someone should have seen this and no one saw this. And so I mean, we are lucky that all of these actually didn't cause any trouble in the end. So seemingly we all have somewhat good intuition on what we're doing. And then there's OCB. This can really go wrong because sometimes the intuition tricks us. We're using mathematics that was not used in our field that much before. We are suddenly dealing with quantum adversaries that people were not considering our field that much. So the same also holds for implementations later, right? We have to implement new algorithms, and if you think about how much stuff we did wrong when we were implementing a number of theoretical stuff, and just think about timing attacks, like who would have thought that you can actually just read out the secret key? I mean, and we get better with these attacks, but we have to kind of figure out the same stuff again now for the post-quantum stuff. And I think that's a good idea to actually try to make sure that we get it right before we roll it out on a daily basis. And for the three schemes like Repaiba, data stream, and things, we actually have formally verified groups now. We have formally verified implementations at least for Hyper by several people, like several different groups. So that is going well, and I think for the other schemes we're also slowly getting there. But I think at least for core schemes that we're picking, this is a very good idea. Sadly, for all schemes, mistakes, it's much effort.
Yes.
Yeah, so really, I love it. Solar verification and formally verified implementations, it has helped a lot in the industry and having standardization present in a TLS 1.3. But I also want to highlight that it does have limitations. We're checking the cryptography through, but it means that we're also leaving aside kind of like the mathematical partners of the problem. So while it's important to have a formal verification, I think it's also important to advance the cryptanalysis of the different underlying mathematical problems that we're currently trying to summarize. So we'll work on that area also to that.
So I'll just add two quick comments. Back during round one of the PTC competition, internally, we had a couple of efforts to do formally verified implementations of some of our schemes, with the goal of trying to get those results done before the round two decisions were made, because we thought it might actually give us a leg up on getting into round two. Now, I somewhat went through round two anyway, so it ended up not. But I kind of would have liked to have seen this in the later rounds actually have a formally verified implementation requirement, because I think that is something we want for our stuff eventually. Maybe that's possible in the future. I will simply point out that I never thought I would see an executive order out of the White House mandating memory safe languages and things like that, and new DARPA programs, to try to lift our current code bases up into that space. So there is clearly an awareness. They talk about it being, we had a National Academies workshop on this just a few weeks ago, on getting back to the secure building blocks and how do we sort of rewrite our foundations in implementations. And so I do think we should be advocating for formally verified implementations of our stuff, and that could become a design criteria, a criteria for how choices are made. So that.
Thank you very much. We have a question here.
I'm really familiar with how formal verification works, but this question like what level of assurance we can have when we have formal verification of an implementation of or a security group. For instance, you were saying like we have security proofs that have been reading for a lot of people for 10 years, so we can have a certain level of confidence that the proof is correct. But then you said no, we get more confident when we add formal verification, right? Because we found bugs by doing this. So my question is like, how much we gain by adding formal verification? It's like close the door for errors or new attacks, or like how much there's a way to say like how much assurance we gain by adding formal verification.
It actually depends on what you're using, but if you're using a tool like EasyCrypt or Coq or like a logical reasoning tool, then in the end, the computer verifies your proof. There is, of course, a soundness assumption that the tool doesn't have any mistakes. But aside from this, you get a guarantee that indeed what you claimed holds. This has the caveat that you might prove something wrong. So the thing that really has to get verified, if you have formally verified proofs or also implementations, is what you have actually proved. Which brings up a new funny layer of people actually have to understand what was written down there and what this actually means. And so this, I think, is something where the tools can also still improve a little bit. But it does significantly increase your, I think, your trust in the scheme, especially because, so just for me, working with these tools has a big impact on how I'm now writing pen and paper proofs. Because it forces you to really do every little argument and do not swipe something under the rules as like, yeah, this is trivial. You know, we do this very often, and because we think this is actually totally easy. And then when you actually start looking at it, then you see that maybe there was a dependency and those things. And this is something what this tool actually catches.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have just 4 minutes before our Escape to Success challenge with our sister event with Alison Bishop, that we are all ready to go. So before we go and complete this table, I would like to ask our panelists, thinking that we have here young guys working in cryptography, what would be, in your view, the way that they can help to this transition in doing their research projects? What would be the advice that you could give to them? It's kind of a difficult question, but I would like to do it in a positive note. Is disabled, so I don't know, maybe Victor.
Yeah, in general, what I would, it's a very open question because to be honest, I don't recommend them to choose something that they actually like, and that they are going to be able to put the effort because otherwise it's going to be a waste of time, and then they're going to hate their lives. But if you can choose, and if you are open to do, let's say, something be just because you want it, I think it makes sense to work on the gaps that we were mentioning before. So try to distance a bit from the classical quantum crypto and try to go into the fancy cryptography, try to see what can be done there. There is a lot of things that are still on early stages, and I wouldn't say they are like low-hanging fruits because the people who cover them are really good, so it's not like a low-hanging fruit anymore. But certainly, there is a lot of things that are pending, a lot of gaps to fill, and there's also a lot of work in terms of protocols that Sophia was mentioning before. I think there's lots of protocol migration that are completely understated, and that they are going to be more complicated and most likely will require maybe I want to say a full design, but partially it's going to be like a more than 50%. So I think there's a big gap there for you guys to fill.
Yeah, so about that. So if you want to work on the topic fancy cryptography, that is really a really nice research project. Also implementation that happens formally, verified, formally implemented, that's great. Or if you're looking for a really nice research project and you want to break something, there's some new signatures in the next competition, try to because that it's always nicer to have more eyes in the mathematical problem all the through, because that makes it much more secure to actually think of using them or not. So if you want to break mail, try to break mail.
Yeah, I think one thing that you can do is take your favorite test and go through the publications and tests of the last few years and look if the stuff can actually be made cross-functional. And then you would like to see it come out, and then you can start thinking about how you would have to change it.
Okay, right.
I'll just add quickly, and if you do that, bring it to a standards organization and help other people do that. Because if you're doing work as a researcher in a company where you're trying to help adapt something to P2Z, tell other people about it, right? Publish about it. Bring it to a standards organization, help get it standardized. Put that everybody else inside the ISF needs more bodies to help them get this humongous lift done, get all of them standards upgraded. Tremendous amount of work, and it's an all night room, so get the companies to sponsor if you're there, to help you know.
Thank you very much. And with that, let me thank the speaker for